My next guest is Jillian DuBois. She serves as an elementary educator in Clearwater, Florida. She's been in the field of education for 2 decades, and she recently published and was the illustrator of the books Live Seashells and A Road to Awesome, A Journey for Kids. Also, Look at You, Piper Lou, and is the optimistic originator of the Imparted Joy LLC. Jillian's journey continues to bring much fulfillment as she thrives on building authentic relationships with her students and guiding their curiosity and wonder. She uses her voice to foster hope for student equity and empathy. Welcome to the podcast, Jillian.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Oh my goodness. Isn't it funny when you read optimistic originator of imparted joy? It's like a tongue twister.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard you on other podcasts, and we've been connected through the Teach Better team for a while. So I'm happy to have you on today. And it's a thrill to get to know more about your work. So let's start out with that trench story. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Oh man, trenches. Aren't we always in the trenches somewhat? Like today it's actually storming, and yeah, I am definitely in the trenches. I was in the trench going to my mailbox just to get my mail. But as far as a personal trench story goes, it would have to be probably my journey through education. And, I had started out, young, wide-eyed, bright-eyed bride back 30 years ago. What am I going to do with my life now that I'm married and we've always wanted children? So we started on that road, just trying to have children, and that did not go so well. But I knew, that one day I was going to be working with children. I was going to have children in my life. So no matter what happened, that was always my heart's desire. But going through the route that we went through, as far as to have children, that infertility journey is a very lonely one. It's a very hard one. It's a very stressful one. Going through all of the treatments, all of the doctors, all of the failed pregnancy tests, it's one of those things that kind of sets the stage for already for failure. Like I've already failed at something. What am I going to do with my life? But you know what? We do what we always do. And we, as strong people, we come out of those trenches resilient, with a lot of grit, with a lot of persistence, dedication, and faith. So I remember that journey very well. And I remember our adventure in adoption. And we adopted our son when he was newly born. I was in the delivery room with his birth mother as she gave birth, and it was the most beautiful thing I think I ever could have gone through. So right there, that was a gift. So we took that gift and we raised that gift to the best of our ability. And when that gift, Austin, was 5 years old and he went into school, I decided, all right, well, what am I going to do? Because he's going to school. I don't want to sit home and watch Netflix and eat ice cream all day. So I can't sit still very long anyway. So I decided to be a volunteer in his classroom, volunteered in the school, and got to know several students and teachers and administrators. And I thought, this could very well be the path for me. So long story short, I basically started out volunteering. The volunteering turned into a job in the cafeteria. That turned into a job in the office. That turned into a job as a paraprofessional, working with students that were exceptional, had exceptional student needs and had IEPs, and was able to give them extra support as needed with their exceptionalities. And then at that time, I was like, all right, I'm ready to take it one step further. And the state of Florida at that time, about 20 years ago, was desperate for teachers. So desperate that they offered what was called a transition to teaching program, where you could, if you had a 4-year degree in anything from an accredited university, you could actually take 15 hours online and you could be granted a professional certification in K through 6 education. So that's what I did. Didn't take very long before I found a job. So in the very school that I was volunteering and working in. So I had already kind of established a nice rapport with colleagues and peers. So jumped in, started my first year. I taught third grade, and I remember, this is great. The kids are sitting here nicely in their rows. They're in their seats. They're doing exactly what I'm asking them to do. And it was awful. It was awful because I literally had no training. I did not know what a growth mindset was. I had no idea how to be empathetic, how to be compassionate towards my students. I felt like I was very authoritarian, and making sure that they got through the curriculum, answered my questions, took their tests, gave them A, B, C, Ds, or Fs. And I thought, that's what you do as a teacher. Because, when I was young, that's what I did when I was a student. So I didn't understand all of the different strategies and pedagogies that were out there. So that was several years that I went through that, thinking there's got to be more than this. It was stressful. I remember I didn't have the internship. I didn't have somebody holding my hand and helping me with lesson plans and doing things like that. So it was hard. And I think I did my kids a big disservice. But, I kept plodding along. I had a lot of support from my colleagues, but, we all kind of did the same thing. I think we just didn't have that broad, open mindset of what education needed to look like for our students. But because I had that awareness though, Dana, I think, that was the beginning of it. Even though I was in those trenches, that was the start of the transformation that was going to come for me. So what happened is I have a student, well, my son is basically my case study. And he was my struggling student who struggles and still struggles. He's an adult now, but he has ADHD and he has dyslexia. So getting him through school and supporting him through each year was a challenge. So on top of having that career where, oh my goodness, I am, doing the best I can, but then I've got to go home and do 3 to 4 hours worth of homework and support my own son. And it got to the point where we were all just breaking as a family. It was too much on my son. It was too much on me, on my husband, and we were just really fractured. So we decided to take a break. I remember very distinctly the day that my son was he was an 8th grader, and he just came home one day and he was just completely devastated that a teacher did not understand him and the way that he was learning, and said he was too slow and not able to get it. And, they were even talking about retaining him in middle school. And I remember that day, and my husband and I sat our son down. We made the decision. We said, hey, buddy, you know what? This is just so difficult, but I think that it's going to be a better decision if we just bring you home and homeschool.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh man, he's 8th grader. What is he going to say? He loves his friends. He loves his community. And I'll never forget that day that he just looked at us and he started crying. And I thought he was crying because he was upset he was going to have to leave his friends. He wasn't. It was almost like a flood of relief just came over him. And he just completely had that burden lifted off of his shoulders. So what became the biggest trench became the biggest mountain experience, because over the course of those next 4.5 years, it absolutely changed our lives. Our family strengthened because we were able to provide education for my son, not just me, but my husband did too. We took field trips. We did things very unconventional because that was the way he learned. If he wanted to lay on top of the dog and read his science books, he did. We created courses in equine science because he had a passion for horses. So we put that on his transcript, and we found a family that had horses that he could volunteer, and he learned how to ride and groom and clean stables and take care of horses and learn equine anatomy. And it was brilliant. It was beautiful. Everything he wanted to learn, he just lit up. And that was how we got through those next 4.5 years. And I remember thinking, all right, when I go back into the classroom, I got some things I'm going to change.
Yeah.
So definitely I did. When I went back into the classroom after he graduated successfully, I thought I can't do things the same. If students, I'm going to give them grace. I'm going to give them all the flexibility that they need. I'm going to build those relationships with them so that I know them and I know their learning style. I know what they need. I know what they need from me. I'm going to listen more than I speak. And that probably was the factor that changed everything, was just being willing to change and to evolve and transform into what students needed, not what I thought I needed to be. So that's kind of where I am today. If students need to sit on the floor and they need to put their feet up on the desk, they can do that to learn. I know I had one student who had last year, his favorite spot was underneath I have a very small desk because I took away my big desk I didn't need because I walk around most of the time anyway. But he would sit in this little cubby underneath where my legs would go. And that was his spot. And he would take a pillow and everybody knew they never fought for that spot. And I thought it was very sweet. But that's the culture I built in my classroom, was let's try and be empathetic and kind. So let him have that spot. And they did. And every day, that's where he was, underneath that desk. And he was a straight A student. That's where he learned best. That's where he did his best work. And it was beautiful. So, just going beyond perfect, thinking that we have to be perfect. And I heard somebody say the other day, and they said, excellence encourages others, but perfectionism discourages others. And that struck me because I thought, we want to provide excellence as educators. We want to provide those trench experiences. We want to talk about it because it's gotten us to where we are today. So we don't want to discourage anybody, but we want to build them up and say, hey, this is what we went through. This is where we are. And this is how we got there.
Yeah, that's so inspiring to hear, just kind of those past 30 years, how, you started teaching without, having any internship, right? And not having that guide on the side, right? And I think a lot of teachers, at least at that time, around 20 years ago, when I started teaching as well, was a very, authoritarian, right? We just focused on the rules and not the relationships a lot.
Yeah.
So for myself as well, it took a couple of years to get used to just making connections with students. And if you're just going to focus on what they do wrong, they're going to push back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then that homeschooling period of time, how you were able to just realize your son's needs and then take that back into the classroom when you went back. And what grades have you been teaching since you went back in the classroom?
So when I had started out originally, I was teaching 3rd and 4th grade. I now teach 2nd grade. So I went from 3rd, 4th, high school
Yeah.
back down to 2nd grade. So I've been in 2nd grade for the past 6 years, and I've loved it. I think that's a really key foundational year for a student. They're just learning how to read. They're pretty literate by 2nd grade, and it's really a neat thing to watch them and to encourage them to take their own journey through their literacy, and watch them bloom, because they become so independent and such little, young men and young women, that in a matter of 10 months, it's incredible how much they grow.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of also ties into, you've written these books in the past couple of years, and I, heard about Live Seashells when it came out. That was in December, but you also published those other books I mentioned in your bio with the Rotos and publishing. And tell me a little bit about the journey to writing these books, and then kind of a little bit of the backstory on one or two of them.
Yeah, well, writing is, especially as an ELA teacher, I mean, that's just ingrained in us, right? We know, hey, we need to teach writing. We need to teach students the structure and the plans and how to write. And all that is great. But truly, writing is from your life experiences, and it's from your heart. And when I actually speak to students or do read alouds of my books virtually, in different classrooms, I always start out by asking the students, I'm like, how many of you have ever gotten stuck when you're writing? How many of you have just sat down, your teacher gives you the prompt and you're really excited and you have nothing?
Yeah.
Everybody raises their hand. I raise my hand too, because I'm like, hey, that's me too. So that's when I say, you know what I've learned and what I've been through as a writer is you step back. You can't force it. You can't push it. When it comes to you. And then you just write what is on your heart, write what's important to you. It may be something related to your family or friends or experiences or trips or things that you love doing, you see that little spark in their eyes and it's like, what? I can write about anything. So I've done that in my own classroom too, with my students, using my own books as mentor text for them. But as far as actually the writing process for me came, during the pandemic, just a time when I had some time to reflect and to do some introspection. And so you just sit down and you just let your heart take over and do some writing. And it all of a sudden just turned into a passion. And then I realized that I had the ability and the gift to illustrate myself, and just started playing around with that and digital tools, and it just kind of bloomed from there. So yeah, the second book, Road to Awesome, Darren Peppard and we co-authored together, and I did illustrate that one. But we had a desire. He had written a book called Road to Awesome, and I had read it as an educator, and it is for educators and leaders. And it was just purely, we've got to find our own road. We've got to find our own path. And when I was reading through it, I took a lot of notes through it and highlighted a bunch of things. And I went, wait a second, this is something we could tailor for students and for younger kids. They need to know that there isn't just one way to do anything. They've got their own mind and their souls and their spirits, and they've got different adventures and experiences that they're going to have in their life, and it's all going to be part of their journey. So Darren and I sat and we talked and we wrote it all out. And so it is really a neat story for students and for kids, because it tells them you can be anything, you can do anything, don't let anything hold you back. Yes, there's going to be speed bumps and roadblocks, but that is all part of the journey. And once you get over those things, you're going to take those things that you've brought with you on your journey. And we have them visualize a backpack full of faith and trust and patience and grace and flexibility. All of those things you can just pull out of your backpack and help you along your journey. So that's a really special one for me, because I can't even wait. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to go back to my classroom and I'm going to read that to my students the first week of school, because I want them to know we're all on this journey together. We're partners. We're the leaders as teachers, but they are not just the followers. They're the learners, the listeners, the doers, the actors, and the thinkers. So
yeah, and kind of giving them that power to write their own stories. And there's been children who have published books themselves, and they always have a good story to tell. And I'm sure for them it's exciting to have a teacher who's a published author as well.
They do get a little starstruck. It's really funny. They would bring books in and they go like, can you sign like all 5 copies? One to my mom, one's for my grandma. And it's just so cute. It's like, sure. Okay. I'm just a regular person, but it's exciting. It really is. It's fun.
Well, talk to me about starting Imparted Joy. You said you started that in January of 2021. What does the LLC entail, and what can people learn from visiting your website?
I did. I started it because I thought, it's funny, I started using the hashtag when I was in Twitter chats and just on Twitter and social media. I was using Imparted Joy. And I just thought, you know what? And I looked it up on Google. I'm like, nobody else uses that. So you know what? I'm gonna snag it for myself. So I did. And I just thought, why not, just have it tucked away as a little LLC for myself. And my husband was very supportive and helped me work all that out. And it just kind of has evolved since the books came out. I've actually published 2 books under Imparted Joy. And I've got, some things coming up with publishing other authors and doing some other illustrating work. And it's just read alouds and helping other people with, I have where you can schedule a session where we just talk. We talk about what are your dreams for writing? What do you want to
Mhm.
write about? What can I help you with? I want to see other authors and other teachers and leaders be successful with their own writing,
Mhm.
personal writing. It's gosh, it's just such a huge gift to be able to share your message with the world. And even if it's only 5 people that buy your book, who
Mhm.
cares? Your voice
Mhm.
is out there. So that's basically what the LLC is doing right now, is just providing a little vehicle for others that want to jump into the maybe the writing and the illustrating and the publishing side of things.
Mhm, mhm. Is that mostly people who are writing children's books or all types of educational related books?
Yeah, right now just children's books.
Mhm.
So I do kind of direct them other places if they're looking to do adult leadership books. But yeah, I feel like that's really going to be my little niche, my little focus is children's authors.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, since you have a lot of that experience having taught
Yeah.
elementary school for a while, and you've read a certain amount of books, and can see kind of what the quality is, what should be used in the classroom and what can transfer over. So yeah, I think that's great that for your writing has now led to serving others and helping others get published. Yeah, that's so important. Just in the past, since the pandemic, you wrote your books and then you are now helping others. So it's
Yes,
cool.
I know. At the time, I mean, it's like, I guess it's just, you just find what you're really passionate about. And when you find it and you grasp it, it just explodes.
Yeah, yeah. So you also have a podcast, and I've listened to a few of the episodes. So you offer tidbits on Moments of Imparted Joy podcast, and those are usually less than 5 minutes. So just give me an example about some of these reflections and maybe something that you reflected on recently on the podcast. And is this planned or scripted or just kind of record as you go?
So I will honestly say most of them are recorded in the school parking lot as I
Mhm,
am pulling into school, usually on a Monday morning,
mhm,
and sitting in my car and just kind of watching the sun come up and just thinking about what my day is going to look like.
mhm,
And either it is something that I want to share right then and there, or
mhm.
it's something that I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I jotted down a few notes and I'm like, all right, I'm going to talk about that for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, they are honestly off the cuff, just little things, but I love to tell stories. So, and I try to keep them short because I know that my own my own time that I can sit and pay attention is very small.
Mhm.
So if I keep it to 5 minutes, I'm good. But the last one was about my UTI, and that was TMI. And the meteor shower of what ifs,
Yeah.
it's we get so in our head sometimes to where, it was just happened to be, I just had another infection. It was the third one in, 2 months. And I was just so over it. And I'm like, and then your mind just takes off. It's like, well, what if it's this? And what if it's this? And what if I can't get a hold of the doctor? And what if, and all of those things just flood, and they flood our mind. And we just
Mhm.
get so taken away. And I know I'm not the only person that has those thoughts, that you take one little thing and it just
Yeah.
goes into this big explosion. So, and it's all about those what ifs. We can't control the what ifs.
Mhm.
We can't control 90% of what happens in our day, but we have the opportunity to respond to it. And I always say that's my respondability, not my responsibility, but my
Mhm.
respondability.
Mhm.
So I'm really trying to be less reactive and to be more responsive, um, by just stopping. stop.
Mhm.
When I'm aware that that's where my thoughts are taking me, down that rabbit hole of trouble and what ifs, I step back and I'm aware and I just acknowledge them and I say, okay, but let's stop it right here. So just taking that little pause and having that awareness each and every day, so that's what those little podcasts are really about. Just
Mhm.
those moments of where you can find the joy when you just step back and you just say, hey, I can change this. This is what I can change.
Mhm.
So they're just little spots, little snippets of joy, little snippets of positivity, and I hope that it does continue. So
Mhm. And that's on I think
it's on I think Anchor
Anchor.
and Spotify. Yep, it kind of goes everywhere once it's on Anchor, which is really
Mhm.
nice.
Mhm. Mhm. So I'll definitely link that in the show notes.
Yeah,
And I think it's good for people to kind of they're able to connect, right? When you have that kind of story about how your thoughts just kind of spiral, right? And
yeah,
just how you can share that your view for the day, and that just those morning thoughts. I think those are always something people can connect with, and that maybe some of your thoughts will also inspire others as they listen to that, right? As they maybe drive into work or listen to it as they come home. So yeah.
yeah. That's definitely my hope.
Well, out of everything we talked about today on the podcast, what's one thing you would like listeners to remember?
I would like for listeners to remember, the more we give ourselves
Mm-hmm.
daily affirmations and the more we give ourselves permission
Mm-hmm.
to be that joy and to give ourselves that grace, I think the our emotional health is going to be so much better.
Mm-hmm.
I know mine is. Not that I don't get stuck in anxiety. I do. I struggle with anxiety. I struggle with depression. But I have found that, just like I said, stepping back and pausing and having that awareness that I'm worthy of those daily affirmations and that I am that living testimony of joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important to remember.
Yeah.
Where can people connect with you and find you online?
Definitely on Twitter, so at Jill DuBois 22, and mostly through Imparted Joy, impartedjoy.com or jilliandubois.com.
Great. Well, I'll link that in the
Yeah.
show notes as well. Thank you so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast. It was a pleasure having you on today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.